which you have more knowledge. And traits are basically essentially kind of like feats in D20, just a little extra thing that you can do. You also get what's called distinctive features, which is just another trait that you can take. You usually get about 2 distinctive features. My character took quick of hearing and swift. And as I said, those are just basically like feats, just little extra things that your character is good at. Now for attributes in the game, there's only 3 attributes, and what's really neat about this, and you'll see this all throughout the game, is that the attributes were actually based on something that Gandalf said in the books. And Gandalf basically said in the books that an adventurer needs to be, have a stout body, a stout heart, and to have wits, really good wits. So they actually took that and based the attributes on body, heart, and wits. Those are the only attributes in the game, body, heart, and wits. And you'll see that all throughout this game, all the elements have really, really been thoughtfully picked out to mimic the spirit of the books, the spirit of Tolkien, and to really elicit the setting, to really bring the setting alive and the themes of the setting. It's just brilliantly done in the game. So you have body, heart, and wits, and when you choose your character, you'll have kind of like backgrounds. And there'll be like so many backgrounds for each culture. So like 4 or 5 different backgrounds for each culture. And you choose a background for your culture, and that background will tell you what your starting attributes are. So as you can see, my character, my Elf of Mirkwood, started with body 5, heart 2, and wits 7. And that's because I chose a background, and that background gave me these attributes that I start with. Now if you look here, your background is listed on the back of your character sheet, the second page here. And the one that I took is called New Hope, which is basically my elf, even though he's an Elf of Mirkwood and they usually stay pretty close to home. They're kind of isolationists. He's actually kind of a traveler, and he spent time out amongst other peoples. So the background will have a lot of role-playing elements that you can really play out in the game. There are, you do have the option of making up your own background with the GM, but these are pre-made ones that are in the game that you can just choose from straight up. Now, if you notice, the attributes, where I had like body 5, etc. here, you have the big circle where you write in your attributes, and then you have a smaller circle where it says favored. So you have favored attributes as well. During character creation, one of the last steps of character creation is it will tell you how to calculate your favored attributes, and I'll go into what those are here in a little bit, and how the regular attributes work as well. In addition, you have common skills. These little boxes here are your common skills, and they are divided into groups. The way they are on the character sheet is each one is listed underneath the attribute that governs it. So under the body attribute, you have a list of skills here: awe, athletics, awareness, explore, song, and craft. Under heart, the heart attribute governs inspire, travel, insight, healing, courtesy, and battle. And the wits attribute actually covers persuade, stealth, search, hunting, riddle, and lore. So the way it's actually, the columns on the sheet, the skills that are governed by each individual attribute line up with that attribute. So that's nice and handy. You never have to worry about what attribute governs what skill, because it's lined up on the sheet. In addition, they're put into skill groups as well. So on the right-hand side, you'll see that there's skill groups for personality, movement, perception, survival, custom, and vocation. And each skill group is like that row. So like the skills and personality in that row are all inspire and persuade, etc. It all lines up in rows for what grouping it's under. And it's just a convenient way to remember what those skills are about, basically. When you choose your background in the game, when you're creating your character, it will give you your ratings amongst these skills, your starting ratings, and you just go in and you shade in the box here for what your ratings are. Each one of these little boxes is equal to 1 skill die, 1 6-sided die that you roll on your checks. Excuse me. Also, when you fill in these boxes, it'll tell you which of these skills that you get to start out with that's favored. And whenever a skill is favored, you underline the skill. So as you can tell on my character, awareness is one of my favorite skills, and it's underlined on the character sheet. Now, What that means is, the way attributes work in this game is that you don't get an attribute bonus like you're used to in D20, where you always add in your attribute bonus in your skill rolls. In this game, when you make a skill check where you roll the feat die, which is like your wild die, and the number of skill dice equal to your skill, you can choose to, and you can even choose to do this even after you roll the dice to try to meet the target number. If you were a little bit short, you can choose to enact an attribute bonus to the skill, and you spend 1 point of hope. Now, hope is actually, it's a currency in the game that you get, and when you make your character, it tells you how to calculate your starting hope score. And when you spend a point of hope, it allows you to take your attribute bonus, whatever your bonus is here, like body or wits or whatever, and you can add the appropriate attribute as a bonus to your skill roll. So let's say if I was making an athletics check and I came up a little bit short, which is governed by my body skill because it's lined up under body, and I needed to, you know, I only missed it by, like, say 3 points, I can spend a hope point to add my body score of 5 as a static number bonus to my roll to try to meet or exceed the target number to be successful. So you can spend a hope point even after you roll the dice to add the appropriate attribute that's tied to that skill as a bonus, and that's how attribute bonuses work. You only get to use them when you spend a hope point in the game, okay? So you don't get that bonus at any other time unless you're spending a hope point. Now, if it's a favored skill, which is one of these skills that's underlined, and when you create the character it'll tell you which of your skills are favored, you get to add the bigger number that's in the smaller circle, the favored rating. So a favored skill is basically something that you're slightly better at. So if I was using body again as the attribute, and I was rolling my awareness, which is a favored skill for me, I would get to use the bigger number here, which is 6. So I would get a +6 bonus instead of a +5 whenever I spend a hope point to make a skill check. In the game, also, you have weapon skills, which you list right here. And you have 2 choices for weapon skills. There's certain packages that you can choose from. And I chose the one where, under the Elves of Mirkwood, he's slightly more skilled with a bow than he is with a sword or a dagger. So you would pencil in your weapon skills there, and you pencil in your damage and the other weapon statistics in this area of the character sheet. Now, in addition, there are 2 stats on the sheet called Valor and Wisdom, and they're kind of important. What this is when you create your character, you have to kind of choose which one you favor. Do you favor Valor or do you favor Wisdom? And the way it works is you get 2 points you can put in one, and 1 point you can put in the other. Valor is for characters that are valorous and brave and noble, and Wisdom is basically wise characters, people like, you know, Gandalf, things of that nature. You put 2 points in one, you can only put 1 point in the other. Whenever you go up a rank in Valor or Wisdom, you're given some kind of a boon in the game. Essentially, some kind of a reward. Now, Valor, the boon that you would receive is called a reward, and what these do is they're actually gear upgrades. You can get gear upgrades that you can put into existing gear, or you can basically say it's a new piece of gear. It's up to you. I chose to favor Valor when I created my character, so I actually started with 2 points of Valor and 1 point of Wisdom. Okay, so I got my first upgrade immediately at character creation, and I chose Woodland Bow. And what that allows me to do is to get an extra volley whenever combat starts. I can essentially get an extra shot unless I'm surprised in combat. And that's before the close combat actually even happens in the game. I get an extra shot, so to speak, with my Woodland Bow. If you choose to favor Wisdom, whenever you go up a rank in Wisdom, you get what's called a virtue. And virtues are essentially kind of like traits. They're extra little traits that you can get that are like feats, that are innate characteristics that your character is good at, something special that they can do, a special ability. In the game, you accrue experience points, and you also accrue what's called advancement points. And when you receive an advancement point, you check off a box over here. There's these 3 little boxes, and you check off where you've received an advancement point for successfully using a skill in an impressive way. And the game kind of explains to you when it's appropriate to receive an advancement point and when it's not. And after you get one advancement point in a skill group category, it's harder to get the second and almost impossible to get the third. But the max you can get in the adventuring phase of the game is up to 3 advancement points. And then later on you spend your experience points and your advancement points to upgrade your common skills, your weapon skills, etc. So you can increase these skills beyond their starting levels and your weapon skills and things like that as well through experience points and advancement points. It's kind of important also to note here in character creation, you're going to go through and, wow, we're actually having a storm outside, I don't know if you can hear that or not, but you're going to go through and you're going to mark off the damage of your weapon. And a lot of times when you first start out, your damage, your melee damage and your weapon damage will be pretty much equal. But if they're different, you can put your range damage in the little circle here and your melee damage in the bigger circle to keep track of what your range damage and your melee damage is. You also have a parry rating here at the bottom, and that can be also changed if you're carrying a shield and things of that nature. It increases your parry rating. And you have an armor rating, which tells you like when you take damage, how many dice you get to roll for your protection roll. And you have an endurance score, which is essentially your health score that you fill in, and it tells you how to calculate that when you're creating your character. And endurance points are basically your health points in this game. And the way it works is when you get into combat, each character chooses a stance. And combat is slightly abstract in this game. It's not grid-based. It's not like D20 games like Pathfinder or D&D 4th edition or something like that. Essentially, when combat begins, each character chooses a stance, okay? And there's 4 different stances, and those stances are incredibly important. The first stance you can choose is called forward stance, and that means that your character is engaged in close combat, and they're basically going all on the offensive and not paying much attention to defending themselves. There's also open stance, where you're in close combat, but you're also paying attention to your defense and your offense. And there's defensive stance, which is the third stance, and that means you're paying much more attention to your defense and not really so much on dishing out the damage and trying to protect your teammates, the people in your party. And then there's also rearward stance, and rearward stance is where a character with a bow would go in the perimeter, where that character can try to take pot shots at villains that you're fighting in combat. That's your range stance. And you can only go into rearward stance if you have at least 2 people that are in close combat in one of the close combat stances, which would be forward, open, or defensive stance. And as long as there's not more than like twice as many bad guys that you're fighting. So like if your party's getting overrun, you can't have anybody in rearward stance because you don't have enough people up there in close combat defending you. The stance tells you a lot. First of all, it tells you the target number that you have to meet or exceed to hit your target. So the actual stance that your character is in tells you the target number that you need to reach to hit your opponent, the bad guy. The stance that you're in gives you the target number to hit your opponent, and it's also the target number your opponent has to reach to hit you. So if I'm in a forward stance, which means I'm all in combat, close combat, and I'm going all out, not paying any attention really to my defense, the target number for me to hit my opponent is only a 6. But that also means that the bad guy's target number to hit me is also a 6. So it's easy to hit me, but it's also easy for me to hit that person because I'm going all out on the offensive. In the forward stance, which is the next up stance in close combat, the target number is a 9. In defensive stance, where you're paying much more attention to your defense, the target number is a 12, and in rearward stance, the target number is a 12 as well. So, and remember, that's the target number for you to hit the bad guy, and it's also the bad guy's target number to hit you. Now, things can adjust those numbers as well. Your parry rating gets added in to that target number, so if I have a parry of 7, and I'm in a forward stance, which is a target number of 6, 7 plus 6 is 13. So they would need a 13 to hit me, and I would need just a 6 to hit the bad guy, unless that bad guy is carrying a shield or something that adds to his parry rating. His parry rating gets